Coming up next on Tech News Today, AT&T did indeed announce its intentions over the weekend to acquire Time Warner. Also, in the same vein, the New York Times wants to buy the Wirecutter. We've got iOS 10.1 and macOS Sierra getting big updates. We'll talk all about that. How the gig economy is changing to cater to its employees for a change. And finally, smartwatches, they're having a bad day. All that and more coming up next on Tech News Today.
This is Twit. Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today, episode 1626, recorded Monday, October 24th, 2016.
This episode of Tech News Today is brought to you by Epson's new EcoTank printers. With Epson's line of SuperTank all-in-one printers, you can print thousands of documents without running out of ink. EcoTank is loaded and ready to print when you are. Visit Epson.com/EcoTank to find out more. Welcome to Tech News Today. This is a show where we talk about everything that has to do with technology. Today, I am Megan Morrone.
I'm Jason Howell. It's why we call it Tech News Today.
That is, it's so appropriately named.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Shall we get to today's tech news?
I think we have to.
Yeah.
Because that's what the title says. First things first, it's not today's tech news. It's this weekend's tech news, but we kind of got to mention it. AT&T officially announced its interest in buying Time Warner in a half-stock, half-cash deal valued at $85.4 billion. The companies weren't planning to make a deal so quickly, but once Bloomberg broke its story, talks supposedly escalated and finalized super rapidly, coming to completion this weekend. Time Warner CEO Jeff Books plans to stay for an interim period after the deal is closed. The deal is set to undergo scrutiny in a hearing held by a Senate subcommittee, though AT&T, of course, is confident this deal will be approved. I don't know, man. There's a lot of widespread panic on the internet about this deal, and it basically all boils down to this whole anti-competitive question that comes up when things like this happen. And mind you, this is a huge deal, definitely the biggest of the year if it's allowed to go through. But I mean, it's just a matter of, do prices increase? Is choice reduced? What happens when distribution and content and access and all that kind of stuff ends up getting swallowed and narrowed even more. There was a really interesting kind of graphical thing that the Wall Street Journal did.
Infographic?
Infographic. There we go. That's better than graphical thing. Thank you. It's a Monday. Sorry. And it just really kind of visualized what this looks like over the course of however many years, back when telecom first started and there were lots of different telecom companies and it all gets folded down into AT&T and then Time Warner. And just when you look at it inside of the infographic, it helps to kind of drive the point home of this isn't good for customer choice. This cannot be good for customer choice.
Yeah, I mean, I said it on Friday. I think that whatever happens, it's not good for the consumer. It's, it's also confusing. A lot of the naming is confusing. Like Time Magazine, no longer owned by Time Warner.
Mm-hmm.
Time Warner Cable, not the same as Time Warner.
Time Warner, yeah,
right. It's it just shows how long they've been trading places, trading names. So because they don't own the same content, it'll be different than the AOL deal, which went fabulously wrong. They talked about this
famously wrong.
Famous. It was fabulous and famous. It was wonderful. They talked about this on Twit yesterday. David Pogue was on. I decided David Pogue on Twit is kind of my spirit animal because they were going back and forth. They had Aaron Griffith from Fortune. And, Leah was like, what do you think, David? And he was like, I don't know, what is a company? And, and I just feel like that's where I am with this. This is not the part of technology that I love to talk about. It's the conglomerates. I think it's important to pay attention to it because we know where our information is coming, who's biased, make sure people are saying they're unbiased. But when it all comes down to it, I'm just I don't care. Just give me my Westworld, give me, my Mr. Robot, and then I don't really care where it comes from.
Well, I mean, the challenge comes in the sense that, okay, give you Westworld, give you Mr. Robot, But what if there's only one real way to get those, and it's actually expensive, and the way we have it now where content, is managed through all these different avenues and facets. No, now you can, this is kind of taking it out far. Maybe it doesn't get there at all, or maybe it gets there a ways down the road. But, AT&T essentially in that scenario can kind of control access to this content more than what it is right now. Like in a perfect world, you've got the content creators creating this stuff and really kind of doing what they can to create compelling content and, move it in a way that it, that distributors, distribution systems want to pick it up. And companies like AT&T are competing in providing faster access to all of this different content. But then when you start to kind of like collapse them together, then you've got, well, this road leads to these few things. And it just seems like a hyper expensive, convoluted mess in the end.
But it's already that. It's been that for two decades. It's already like there is already one way to get Westworld, HBO. Like, yes, I can get it on HBO Go or HBO Now, and it's already pretty expensive. It's not cheap. So, I don't know. I just think it's like, it's not, the 80s anymore. We already have so much conglomeration. To me, it's just like at this point, just changing different hands.
Yeah.
Well, Recode reports that the New York Times is buying products review site The Wirecutter and Sweethome for more than $30 million. The Wirecutter was founded in 2011 by journalist Brian Lamb, formerly of Gizmodo and Wired. They specialize in extensive, meticulously well-researched reviews of tech products. Their sister site Sweethome offers similar reviews on home products. And the company makes money through affiliate links, mostly to Amazon, but also to some other smaller niche sites. As digital ad revenue decreases, sites might be looking towards this old-fashioned affiliate link method. I call it old-fashioned, but it did seem where like a lot of, just a lot of regular bloggers were making money. But this sort of way of making money has done well for the Wirecutter. And they're one of those, they really were a bootstrapped site. Mm-hmm. And they really prove that if you have good content, then people will come to it. The Wirecutter really, when they do a roundup of products, they really do it right. They get a bunch of products in. They have the people that know about this stuff really reviewing them. There's no payola anywhere. It's really like they look at everything and they give really good reviews. It's the site that I go to when I want to buy anything from like an eyelash curler to a smartphone. It really is where I go. I'm excited that they were bought for so much money, but I'm a little worried at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it boils down to. Everybody is super excited for the fact that this bootstrap site, Wirecutter, which I love as well. How can you not love it when you go there and you see the quality, the level of attention that they give to these reviews, and to see that it was totally bootstrapped, and yet now they have this big payday, and that's awesome for those who kind of got it to that point. You can't help but worry just a little bit about how that process changes. There's one thing Wirecutter has in spades is trust of its readers. Its readers really trust the reviews that they do, and partially that's because they didn't go the ad approach necessarily. They went the affiliate link approach, and even there you have to trust beyond a certain point, because it would be very easy for me to run a site and be like, yeah, and I'm just going to rate the really expensive things really highly, and then you're going to want to buy all the expensive things and I'm going to get a kick down. No one really thinks that of the Wirecutter. So they've got a lot of really just great customer loyalty, I don't know. Customers love, the readers love the Wirecutter. So let's hope that they can kind of keep that magic in transitioning to working for a company that has historically done things a lot differently. Though at the same time, New York Times also has affiliate links that they use, beyond. This might just be New York Times not necessarily going after the Wirecutter because the Wirecutter is a moneymaker, but more because the Wirecutter brings with it this knowledge of this different way of doing things and maybe entering the next the next realm of digital, being in the digital world. Maybe this is good for the New York Times to learn a few lessons.
Yeah, I think so. Some people might argue with me, but I think that the New York Times has garnered a lot of trust. People trust them.
This year in particular, I think people are less likely to say that.
I don't know. It depends certainly on your
sure.
Political leanings, but I don't know that your political leanings have a lot to do with whether you're going to buy Beats Bluetooth headphones or Kenevo Bluetooth headphones. I don't. So but Yeah, and then the New York Times is doing a lot of digital stuff. They're really getting into podcasting now. They have a lot of podcasts, and I do think that is their way of reaching the next generation. So maybe gadget reviews are going to be another way. They say that Lam, founder of the site, will remain in an advisory role. Jackie Chang is the editor-in-chief, and Christopher Mascari, product director, will remain in those roles. So that's good news.
For sure.
And was all cash deal closed today.
Right on. Congratulations. Last Friday's hack attack that shut down many top sites for a large portion of the United States seems to confirm to some degree what security analysts have been predicting for some time, that the Internet of Things is sorely insecure and ripe for exploitation. The complex hack was executed by exploiting webcams and digital video recorders, DVRs. And one big reason for these targets was the lack of customization to the default passwords that shipped with affected units. Chinese firm Hangzhou Xiongmai, I hope I said that right, technology company, they're the creator of parts used inside surveillance cameras, is actually making a difficult decision here to do something about that threat, with plans to recall some of its earlier products sold in the United States. The company also plans to strengthen its passwords and issue patches to devices made prior to April 2015. Their main products, of course, are all kind of like webcam models, and some of those parts were actually targeted during the attack. Some were saying that it was a large swath of the attacks were due to these cameras. Of course, those at the company say that that is not true. However, they really want to kind of get out ahead. It kind of reminds me in some ways of the Samsung Note 7, where it's like, okay, we see this threat, and though Samsung didn't do the best job, they really did kind of try to act early. They had the best intentions. It just didn't work out so hot for them. So I see this. Dang it, that wasn't even intentional. I can't claim that as an intentional pun. So whoever's keeping score, make sure to note that. But I think this is good, right? Like the Internet of Things, ripe for this sort of insecurity. And it really falls into the hands of those that are creating these insecure devices to do something about it. And so I think this is a good example to be set.
Ben Shore, who's a viewer, he tweeted at us that he listened to a report of the shutdown on Friday and was waiting for us to say, the most important thing about your Internet of Things devices, the most important security step you should take is change the default password. And we didn't mention that, which is great for routers and some other devices. But as you pointed out, there's a lot of devices that do not let you change the default password. There's no way to know. Like we said, there's no way to know whether you should get updates or not. So, some of these recalled items ship the inability to set a password. And so this is good. If they're actually going to make an effort to recall them, I mean, they're not burning up in anyone's hands, so I don't know that they will. And what's really interesting about this company, because at the same time that they were saying this recall, they also threatened to sue people who said that their brand was the brand of camera that was being turned into this botnet. Like this. So at the same time, they were saying that came from Krebs. Yeah. Brian Krebs said, that they were saying that people were tarnishing their brand. So I don't know. I mean, I just think that as consumers, we need to push the creators of these devices to have better security on these devices. Like that's our job. When we talked about this with Becky like 3 weeks ago, and she said, like, what is their reason? They just want to sell these products, and if no one's saying like, I would rather choose this security camera over this security camera because I know how to change the password and get updates on this, as opposed to that. But people aren't saying that. They want, the cheapest one or whichever one, that's not part of our buying process, and it really should be.
Yeah, and what is the barrier of entry for selling these products? Some of the larger companies might have the resources and place emphasis on security from the onset, but there's just so many of these little devices in many different ways connecting to the internet. So, I think it's just really hard to ensure that all of these teams, all of these companies that are creating these little devices everywhere actually even consider the security implications and understand why that's important in the long run. And certainly, things like what happened on Friday will help them to understand that.
And I joke that one way to be secure in your Internet of Things device is to not use an Internet of Things device. And of course we don't, I don't want to say that, but does your toothbrush need to connect to the internet? I don't know. That's a question that you might want to ask yourself.
Is there a toothbrush that connects to the
Yes.
end? There must be.
Bruce has one. Ask him about it.
What? Yeah, okay, I'll
Tells
have to
him
ask
if he's, so then he can check to see if he's brushed well and brushed often. And
Well, okay, often.
And then
I see.
contacts
How
the
long
tooth
has it been on?
fairy
At
when-
what time do you normally brush? Why do we need to know these things? Just brush your teeth.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Apple released the superfecta of updates today. Mac OS Sierra 10.12.1. It improves stability, compatibility, and security. iOS 10.1 offers the much anticipated portrait mode for iPhone 7 Plus users, which simulates shallow depth of field photos taken by a DSLR. I got a couple of those. I took one of Leo and Jason that I think turned out okay. It's still in beta, so it's not perfect. iOS 10, the new version, also lets you play those laser balloon and firework effects over and over again. So if you sent me one, well, not you, Jason, but someone with an iPhone sent me one, I could play it over and over again. WatchOS 3.1 finesses WatchOS 3. That includes a bug that wasn't letting the Series 2 watch charge all the way. tvOS fixes bugs and improves security, allows you to use Siri to search YouTube. It doesn't allow you yet on the Apple TV that single sign-on that we've all been waiting for, so you don't have to sign into all your separate accounts to watch all your Westworld or your Mr. Robot or whatever it is that you watch. So, yeah.
Megan, if I could, I would send you a laser balloon thing.
Thank you.
But I can't because I don't have an iPhone. So, what's your favorite thing? Is it portrait mode?
Portrait mode, I think so far. I mean, that's why I got the iPhone 7. There's the picture that I took of Leo, and then there's also the one that I took of Jason there too, which it's the bokeh effect. So I call that bokeh howl.
Bokeh howl.
But okay, so here's the question. It looks way better on my iPhone than it does when I put it on Twitter.
It looks a little.
So that's my question.
Grainy.
I was listening to the Vergecast over the weekend, and they were making the point of.
No, I can't do it. I can't do it on demand. I'm sorry.
They made the point of the difference between the Pixel camera and the iPhone 7 camera, and that these cameras are their photos are designed to look best on the device they were taken on, which makes sense when you think about it. But I had never heard of that because, my photos look amazing on here, but then when I put them on something else, so the Pixel has different features also that are, I guess, designed to look better when you're looking at them on a Pixel.
Well, I mean, no matter what, when you're talking about just that aspect alone, pixel density on a screen that size versus on, some people are watching this on their 40-inch television or their 52-inch television. So any photo, I think, unless it's insanely high res, is just going to look not as good on the larger screen as it does on that smaller screen. But you're right. We saw it on the screen on your phone. We're like, wow, that looks actually really good. And then when you posted it to Twitter, we're like, wait a minute, where did all that noise come from?
Yeah.
But maybe it's a beta thing. I don't know. Or maybe I'm just that pixelated in real life. And
you're not.
I'm learning that now. I could be. Maybe we just don't see it with our untrained eyes.
Maybe. And Leo's picture was taken on the iOS Today set, so it had all his lighting and stuff, where yours was just taken under those fluorescent lights that are so gross in our office. But
that's the next frontier. Make a default camera that looks good in bland office lighting,
right?
And I think we'll all be super happy,
right? Because the background was your cubicle and it fuzzed it all out, so you couldn't see. So it might have, I don't know. tvOS, if you're interested in that, Leo and I talked about that at length on iOS Today. You can download that. twit.tv/iOS.
The Internet of Things hack shows us what hackers are capable of when it comes to large swaths of insecure technology. But what could happen in the soon-to-be reality where cars are fully automated? The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration issued guidelines that emphasize the importance of addressing these issues to, quote, stay ahead of the bad guys. The guidelines emphasize a multi-layered approach that still protects a vehicle from an attack, even if one layer has been penetrated. The goal of the voluntary best practices that they laid out is that automakers of all types will create their next generation vehicles with security top of mind from the very start. I mean, this is exactly what we're talking about with the Internet of Things. It's super timely, right? And you can imagine kind of don't even need to imagine because there are examples of what can happen, but you can imagine the lengths, the things that could happen in an insecure autonomous driving world. There was, of course, the the Jeep Cherokee that was hacked into. Researchers, can't remember if it was researchers or hackers.
It was
researchers.
Yeah, it was
to kind of prove the point. Hacked into the Jeep Cherokee, and they were able to deactivate the brakes and the transmission to kind of show that, like, you may think these, that controls and everything are siphoned off and inaccessible, but guess what? They are not.
Yeah, I mean, it's really scary because, we talked about the, the possibility that there could be some sort of Internet of Things bot, and we thought that's the future, and then it happened. So, like, instead of us just like, oh, look, I can't get it to Twitter, like, there's a bunch of, where the people's Twitter pictures are, there's just it's dead. That's so sad. But it's like a car, like if there's a bot that attacked a car, that's a lot worse.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the NHTSA says that car companies really need to do penetration tests. They really need to treat this as, like, use security techniques that they use in the military, that they use in the intelligence community. I mean, we talk about sometimes how there are holes in that too, but they're better than just they're better than what's in your security camera at home or what's in your internet connected toothbrush. So this is serious and it has to be taken seriously.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like the multi-layered security approach is a big key of that, right? Like so many pieces of our technology that are, quote, protected are protected with a single layer of security, and all that means is that that's one thing that needs to be broken into in order to gain full access. So here they're talking about the ability to identify potential for some sort of huge failure and then focus on those parts so that if an attack is detected there, it can kind of, siphon off into something else, transfer from a normal state into a heightened alert state that then kicks in another layer of security, and then hopefully get it as quickly as possible back to a reasonable state of operation, because you can't have everything shut down either if there's a hack. Like, oh no, there's a hack. All right, well, we're just going to turn the system off. Like, that doesn't work either. The car or the automobile still has to be somewhat functional in order to maneuver through it so that everything's safe, even in the face of an attack. So pretty important stuff.
Well, some gig economy startups are experimenting with pretty weird techniques with their employees. For example, paying them a living wage. What will they think of next? Find out. But first, let's take a minute to thank Epson, the sponsor of this episode. Epson's revolutionary cartridge-free EcoTank line of printers for home and office. The EcoTank ET4550 wireless all-in-one printer does not use ink cartridges. It features an amazing, innovative, refillable ink tank, earning it the title of CES 2016 Innovation Awards honoree. No more out-of-ink frustration. It includes up to 2 years of ink. That's equal to 11,000 black pages or 8,500 color pages. You can save up to 80% on ink with low-cost replacement bottles. It's powered by precision core printing technology. It has auto two-sided printing and a 30-page auto document feeder, easy wireless printing from tablets and smartphones. All EcoTank printers deliver an unbeatable combination of convenience and value. With Epson's EcoTank line of printers, you'll have the freedom to print without running out of ink. The Epson EcoTank system was named 2016 Small Biz Windows Printer of the Year. Visit Epson.com/EcoTank today to transform the way your home, office, or work group prints. For the best combination of ease and value, turn to the Epson EcoTank printers. That's EPSON.com/EcoTank. And we thank Epson for their support. Just a few short years ago, companies like Uber and Instacart were making a name for themselves and growing at exponential rates by hiring mostly 1099 employees and not offering benefits. But Alison Griswold from Quartz looked into a few companies who've decided to see what happens when they treat their employees better. Welcome, Alison.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. So first, let's talk a little bit about how gig economy companies like Uber and Instacart grew so fast, partly due to the way they structured their employees.
Sure. A lot of it was you saw these companies look at Uber and they said, Uber was really successful. They hired everyone as a contractor, and we should do that too. You know, what Uber did for rides could easily apply to groceries, could apply to food delivery, any other scenario. And so we'll just copy their model.
And so tell us about the companies that you looked at. Juno is a ride-hailing service, and Managed by Q, an office cleaning service. What kinds of things are they doing differently?
What these companies are doing differently is that some of them are outright hiring their employees. So like any traditional W-2 worker, they're getting benefits, they're getting a minimum wage or even more competitive pay than that. And then Juno is interesting because it still hires people as contractors, but it's decided to give them an equity stake in the company, which is rare for a company that doesn't hire its workers outright.
So pretty much since like the turn of the millennium, a lot of companies have been, filling the office with snacks or, paying well and ping pong tables, beer, all those kinds of things. How is this different? Like what you're talking about, treating employees different. How is this different, what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you've seen a lot of companies, especially in the sort of proverbial startup space, that have tried to use these hacks to keep people happy that are cheaper than the things that maybe matter more, like benefits or wages. So it's a lot easier to buy, a 6-pack of Bud Light for your workers than it is to give everyone a 3% raise to offset inflation, right? And then the corollary with gig companies is they've sort of made this bet that they can save so much money, as much as 30% on labor costs, by not having to pay benefits, to comply with traditional workplace protections like paying a minimum wage and other stuff in that vein, that it is ultimately worth it to hire laborers who maybe aren't as committed. But where that starts to break down is if you can't retain your workers and you have really high turnover, then all that money you're saving by not giving them benefits and by paying them less is going out the door in trying to replace them when they leave and hire new people and advertise. And that becomes very expensive very quickly.
So, I mean, how much are companies spending on recruiting these employees? Like how much does Uber spend on recruiting employees?
Uber, it's all over the place. There have been times that they've spent like thousands of dollars to recruit drivers in the form of bonuses. Bloomberg did some really good reporting on their losses this year. And the vast majority of it was sort of to what they call driver incentives. So those could be recruitment bonuses. They could be money paid out to drivers who are driving more hours than they necessarily need to. Then you look at DoorDash and Instacart and Handy, and a lot of those companies spend several $100s a head to bring in people. Even ads on Craigslist aren't cheap. And that's where most of these companies do their recruiting. They post things on Craigslist saying, come work for us. It's flexible. It's great. But you have to pay for each of those ads, and that adds up really fast.
So what kind of evidence is there that that it's really lucrative to give benefits and pay in equity to employees? Is there evidence that it can be good for the company as a whole?
I think it's still something that companies, especially in the startup world, are grappling with. But the most interesting case is actually not at all a startup, it's Walmart. And there was a really great piece in the New York Times by Neil Irwin that talked about how Walmart, has been running this experiment essentially since last year when it told everyone it was going to raise pay for its workers. And Walmart, is the company that's notorious for paying people as little as possible. There are all those stories about how a lot of the money it pays to its own labor pool goes right back into the store so they can buy food stamps. And so the fact that Walmart came out and said, we really are going to invest more in our people. We're going to pay them more. We're going to help them advance up the career ladder. And we think it's going to pay off for us in the form of better service, better stores, happier customers. Like a company like Walmart doesn't do something out of the kindness of its heart. If it's doing it, it's because they fundamentally think it will also help the bottom line.
Yeah, for sure. When I was reading through your piece, kind of the thing that kept kind of popping in my mind as I was going through it is just the fact that the workforce, especially in technology, I feel like, but kind of the career path nowadays versus like the career path that, let's say, our parents' generation had. Like there's a lot more kind of transient, people are a lot more transient in their careers. Do you think that kind of ties into this a little bit? I feel like the companies are learning the same lesson they've already learned in the past, but are people just way more transient, so it's harder to please them, in ways of bonuses or benefits or that sort of stuff?
It's funny, you hear that thing about millennials job hop more, but I think the evidence on it is kind of inconclusive. Like, I remember reading something in 538 that millennials don't necessarily job hop more than their parents did. And it's just one of these trends that we talk about. I do think there's probably something to the idea that because of the internet, it's easier to have a really flexible job, right? You can maybe set your schedule more at the last minute. People work from home. There's less attachment to the traditional office that you would have had before that development. But I really think the gig piece is sort of something that's come with a smartphone. Apoorva Mehta, who is the CEO of Instacart, once said in an interview that the reason his company was possible today, where Webvan and Cosmo, which were two other on-demand anything companies, had famously imploded in the early dot-com bubble, was that now they had this huge pool of crowdsourced labor that they could access through smartphones and those sort of connections on call as they needed it. Whether that's true, I think, is very much an open question that we're seeing play out now, but that is fundamentally the premise.
So if you're talking about paying someone more, that, everyone, you would assume that if you got paid more, you would do a better job. I mean, there's lots of reasons why people do good at their job, but one of them is you pay me more, I'm going to do better. But if you're talking about equity in the company, that's to get people to stick around. But what about the people that are just itinerant in general? There was another piece in the New York Times recently about this whole generation of people who are retired from corporate life or whatever job they had before, but they still need to, you live a lot longer these days. You still need to work. And so there's all these people that they own motorhomes and they just travel around. They love the traveling part of it, but they're still working. This article talks about Amazon that has benefits for these people for they need to hire a bunch of people in their in different places just during the holidays. And part of the benefit is that they pay for these people's campground fees. So what about the benefits for people that are itinerant by nature? And what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't actually know if there's that much precedent for that. I mean, what comes immediately to mind is sort of migrant workers, but I'm not sure that's a good comparison. A lot of what these companies will say is the biggest benefit of their job is that people can work on their own schedules. They can do it flexibly from where they want, when they want. A lot of them, Uber and Airbnb, they do have a lot of retirees on the platform because it's sort of a good, flexible way to supplement what they have saved and bring in more money. But then there's the flip side, right, which is, if, I don't know, maybe you don't want, maybe if someone needs a better job and they can't get it, and because of the labor market, they're stuck driving for Uber. I don't know if that's always the best outcome.
Yeah, that's the hard, because I feel like I've talked to people and, they say I don't need benefits, as an Uber driver. I just like the job. I like how flexible it is. So I feel like, we've talked about this before. There should be some sort of middle ground for employees for the gig economy. I know that you cover this a lot. Is there any talk of some kind of employee that would be not just a freelancer, but not a permanent employee, somewhere in between, to serve this gig economy?
There are a lot of interesting proposals about it. One suggestion is to have it's called a dependent worker. And so that's a person where they are largely autonomous, but they also are able to receive some kinds of benefits. There are proposals about portable benefits, which is where essentially, every company would pay into a pot and you would be able to access benefits through that. And it would sort of move with you as you change jobs and changed employers. I think whatever actually happens is going to be something that winds very slowly through Washington in the legislative process. And there might not be a solution to it anytime soon.
Well, Alison, thank you so much for joining us. Alison Griswold is a reporter at Quartz. She is Alison Griswold on Twitter. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. All right, Dan Ficker wrote into TNT at twit.tv regarding our discussion last week about how AI is recreating characters like Joey from Friends. Dan writes, it's certainly early days, but I think you're right. It can be done. On the other hand, it's been done for years, but more by a team of people. Roger Ebert's extensive TV and radio recordings were used for him to create a synthesized version of his voice. I think they talked about it in a TED Talk years ago, he says, and of course they do. We have the link in the show notes. Also, director Robert Zemeckis and his visual effects team did some great work like this in Forrest Gump. The main character is inserted into historical events. They even give new lines to historical characters, likely using many recordings and a bunch of VFX know-how to get these to look, sound convincing. And in Contact, they used videos of Bill Clinton to make a press conference about aliens that never happened. So this type of thing can already be done with a smart team and thousands or millions of dollars, but it'll be scary once it can be done convincingly by computers for much less. Yeah, and I mean, we've seen this also in like recent years with like musicians, right? We hear about musicians who are no longer alive and they're doing a concert, and you know, they've literally pieced together a new performance based on, well, using computer technology, of course, but based on previous performances, and created something entirely new. So it's totally possible. What's weird about this is sicking a bunch of computers at the job, just saying, all right, create something new out of this particular character. And the fact that it's able to do it, like I know we're going to see this sometime in the near future where it will be able to do it way more convincingly than Joey and Friends that we saw last week.
I mean, do you know for sure that I'm not that right now?
I don't know that we aren't living in a simulation and that none of this is real. I don't know that for sure, everyone. There you go.
TNT's fan of the day is Jacoby on Twitter, who says, working on music and monologues while drinking tea in my Twit mug and wearing my Twit gear.
Yeah.
So glad I got the Eastside Studios limited time only hoodie. Thank you, Jacoby.
Nice.
Show us how you watch or listen to TNT, record a video, take a picture of yourself or your setup, post it on Instagram, Google+, Twitter, Facebook. Use the hashtag HowIWatchTNT, and we're going to find it. And if you are an AI and not a real person living in the real world, definitely send us yours because we want to see that.
Yeah, I want to see what How I Watch TNT looks like from the perspective of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, living among us.
A new report from IDC shows that smartwatches are not actually the new hotness anymore, not by a long shot. In the third quarter of 2016, the smartwatch category saw a 51.6% reduction in shipments year over year. Some reasons given for the drop include the timing of the second generation of the Apple Watch, as well as the ongoing delays of the new Android Wear 2.0 platform update. But those in aggregate add to a shrinking demand for wearables by pushing purchases off to another time that may or may not ultimately end up happening. IDC ultimately concludes that consumer interest in smartwatches is waning, and the category's purpose isn't always evident to users, so that's a big challenge.
So I tried to buy my second Apple Watch this weekend.
How'd that go?
Well, it didn't go so well.
Oh.
I went to the Apple store in Santa Rosa. I had to wait to speak to someone. I just wanted to try it on. And then this person was helping me and two other people. And they had all these questions that I knew the answer to. Have you ever been in that situation where I was just like, I want to answer their questions?
Yes, I've been in that situation.
And not just that like the Apple store employee was saying something wrong, but I just wanted to give my I've had this for, since it came out and I love it and here's what I use it for. And
Right.
I was just like my enthusiasm and I couldn't share. But then I got frustrated and left. I still will buy it. I'll just buy it online. But I can get, I don't know that, I know more people whose Apple Watch is in their drawer that they just don't wear than I know people who wear them regularly and love it as much as I do.
Yeah.
And watches in general. I was telling my daughter and her friend, I'm going to go buy an Apple Watch. And her friend was like, oh, my grandmother has a watch. As if watches in general were just something that only grandmothers even more. And I just thought that's part of it too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of people said that. Like, why, in this day and age, I mean, sure, there are people that absolutely love their watches, but why do we need one? We've got the phone already and it does a lot of these things and we're already kind of accustomed to it, used to it. It doesn't have to tether with another thing. I mean, there's a lot of asterisks involved with the smartwatch thing. It works for some people. And that, like I look and I go, rewind my life a couple of years when smartwatches first started hitting Android and everything. And I was super excited about it. Got to watch it at Google I/O. So I automatically had one. I never really had to buy one because they handed it out at Google I/O. But all along, like for any of the benefits, any of the things that I liked the watch for, which was basically notification triage, I had to ask myself, like, but would I buy it? Like, would I spend $250, $300, $400 on this watch? And no, I actually wouldn't. Not for that, because it's just not. It's not a killer app necessarily. It's not a killer feature that I absolutely have to have. And so, sure enough, like you were talking about your friends with the watch in the drawer, mine sits on the charger on my nightstand. Like it's sitting on the charger, and I never think to put it on because I'm out of the habit. And once I fell out of the habit and realized I could live my life without it, it kind of took away some of the magic for it. So I don't know. It's just it's kind of a category that still just hasn't really proven itself, and that's evident.
Yeah, I think for fitness, it does. But I mean, when I talk about fitness, I mean like runners. You're not really a runner. That's not the exercise that you do. Yeah. But I think, and that's why if you look at that graph, Garmin's growth year over year is the best as any of the other wearables, and Garmin's been doing this for 14 years. Like they had a Garmin, for your arm. They had a Garmin like for your wrist. The Forerunner, I think that was one of their first, devices, and they already had GPS because that was what they had been doing before. And it was, so they know what people want. And this is not everyone. Like everyone doesn't need a Garmin, but like the people who run and love them, there's the first one that was like, that's almost, I think that was 14 years ago.
That's a brick.
Yeah. And it's just for tracking your runs.
Yeah.
That's what it does, and it does it well. And in terms of like the workouts you do, like in the gym and stuff, when we just there was a study last week, the heart rate sensor is not as good as the kind that you strap to your chest.
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me.
I would wear the watch to the gym, but I would never use it for the heart rate thing. It was because of a timer. Like if I'm doing a certain exercise and I want to go a minute, it might be easier for me to go start and do it as opposed to like pull out my phone or position my phone so I can see it, and then the screen goes off and I'm all bummed because I can't actually see the timer. That was the whole point. But that that was just one of very few use cases that I came up with that I had to like figure out as far as the watch was concerned. And over time, it just kind of like took the wind out of the sails, I think.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is a challenge that smartwatches overcome. I think fitness is if there is any killer app for these things, but that certainly doesn't apply to everybody.
Yeah. But I mean, they say like working out with the friend is a good way to stay healthy. And Leo said today, because we now track each other's activity. So like on my activity, it says, no, it's just Leo and my dad. And so, like he said, because he knows that I'm watching, Renee Ritchie also, that he worked out harder because like he knows we're watching and we send nice. Thumbs up and stuff. So that's proven. That's something scientifically proven. If you know someone's there with you, cheering you on or taunting you, in the case of me and Leo, then, you're going to work harder. So yeah, could you do that in a device that wasn't $369? And yeah, maybe. Mm-hmm.
Maybe the next step is like you're working out and they know that you're working out and they want to motivate you. So suddenly they appear on your watch. Like, hey, Megan, how's it going? You're doing great, but you got to push it. Would that be motivation?
Yeah, that's
or would that just be weird?
Step. Yeah, both.
Both. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Don't do that, smartwatch makers. If you want this category to thrive, don't do what I just said. TNT records live every Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, 11 p.m. UTC at twit.tv/live. Be part of the show by emailing us at tnt@twit.tv. Leave us a short voicemail, 260-TNT-SHOW, and find us on Twitter. We're at Tech News Today TV.
Twit is now on the Amazon Echo Flash Briefing. Every day, get updates to the latest tech news and events from Leo, Jason, and me. To hear Twit's Flash Briefing, be sure to go to your Amazon Echo app, search for Twit, and then subscribe to our Flash Briefing. It is a great way to start your morning. Find all the ways to subscribe to our show at twit.tv/TNT. And if you want to tweet at me about why or why not you like your Apple Watch, I'm at Megan Morrone.
And I'm at Jason Howell. Thanks to our technical director, Brian, for all the digital wizardry that he pulls off every single time. He's behind the switches. Thanks to Burke, of course, for scrolling words on screen that we read. Thanks to Kevin for editing and making us look good. And thanks to you for talking tech with us today. We'll see you all tomorrow. Bye, everyone.